So the last thing that we're going to look at today is solving a quadratic equation, right? So earlier we've just been factoring expressions, okay? But now we're going to add an equation to the mix, and we're going to talk about one major property here that you need to put in your notes that we actually have to remember, okay? So example 1, it says we've got x squared minus 3x equals 10, right? Well, I told you earlier that the standard form of a quadratic expression is this. You know, it's ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? Well, standard form of a quadratic equation just has the equals 0, okay? So it's really important that we understand that, okay? This is an entire section of the textbook that I skipped because I'm just going to tell you the summary of it right now, okay? And so at this point, what we want to do, the first thing that we want to do is to put our equation in standard form. So if you need to make steps, right, say put equation in standard form. Okay, so that's the very first thing we have to do now. How I'm going to put this in standard form is I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides, okay, and I'll be left off with now x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0, okay? So again, all I did first was I put it in standard form. I basically want everything to one side of the equal sign, and I want 0 on the other side. Okay. Now, just like last time, I'm going to identify A, B, and C here. Okay. So in this particular one, my A is 1, right? 1x squared. My B is negative 3, right? And my C is negative 10. Okay. So remember, I'm going to stop giving you guys your x chart, but just make your own. It's not that hard. Okay. We want two numbers that multiply to A times C, but add to B, right? So A times C in this case, 1 times negative 10 is negative 10, and our B term here is negative 3, right? So we want to look at all the ways we can multiply two numbers to get negative 10. I can take negative 1 times 10 or 1 times negative 10, okay? I can also do 2 times negative 5 or negative 2 times positive 5, right? And I know that all those products are negative 10, but I want to see what their sums are because their sums actually have to be negative 3. So I'll just add up these numbers here. This gives me 9, that's not going to work. This gives me negative 9, that's not going to work. This gives me negative 3. So it looks like 2 and negative 5 will be my magic numbers here. Okay, so I'm going to write out my factors of x plus 2 and x minus 5, okay? And we're going to write equals 0. Okay, now this is the part that's very, very important, okay? This is what's called the zero product property, okay? And this is where we're going to take this right here and set it equal to 0. So we're going to take this factor and set x plus 2 equal to 0. All right? We're also then going to take this other factor and set this equal to 0. So I'm going to set x minus 5 equal to 0. Now all we're going to do now is solve both equations, and we're going to have two answers to our question. Right? So I'll solve this equation by subtracting 2 from each side, and I'll get x equals negative 2. Okay? And that's going to be one of my answers. Okay? Now for the other part, I have x minus 5 equals 0, so I'll add 5 to each side, and I'll get x equals 5, right? Now we have to understand, if you plug in negative 2 to either of these, for x, your product will be 0, right? Because you take 0, so if I plug in negative 2 plus 2 times negative 2 minus 5, your product will be 0, right? Or if you plug in 5, so it could be 5 plus 2, which is 7, and then you multiply that by 5 minus 5, which is 0. 7 times 0 is 0, right? And so those are going to be our two answers here, okay? Now we're going to go ahead and run through maybe one more example in this video, but this is very, very important that we understand this. Okay, so my smartboard's running a little bit slow today, sorry. Okay, so same thing as last time. Let's go ahead. We want to write this in standard form. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And so I'll do that by subtracting 24 from each side. Okay, and this will give me now x squared minus 5x minus 24 equals 0. Okay, and so now it's time to identify A, B, and C. Right, so my A term is still 1. Okay, my B term is -5, and my C term here is -24. Okay, so remember, I'm looking for these two numbers that multiply to A times C but add to B. Right, so A times C in this case is -24. My B term here is -5. Okay, and I'll write out my factors of -24 here. Right, so I can multiply 1 and 24. Okay, 1 and -24, or -1 and +24. Or maybe +2, -12, -2, +12. I could also do, let's say, 3 and 8, so 3, -8, or -3, +8, or 4 and -6, or -4 and +6. Right? There's lots and lots of ways that we can actually multiply numbers together to get these, right? But now we want to find all their sums and figure out which two of these numbers will actually add to -5. Okay? Now, we'll start getting better at this, but you should be able to identify this actually pretty fast now. Okay? 3 plus a -8 is going to give us that -5. Okay? So 3 and -8 are going to be the two numbers that we use here in our factors. Okay? So now we're going to have x plus 3 and x minus 8, right? And we're going to set that equal to 0. Okay? Now we're going to use this zero product property again, okay? And set this factor, x plus 3, equal to 0, and also the other factor of x minus 8 equal to 0. And we'll solve both equations, okay? So this one will be, when I subtract 3 from each side, will be x equals -3. Okay, and this other one, if I add 8 to both sides, will give me x equals +8. Okay, I hope these examples are helpful. Okay, make sure that you check out your homework and do these examples, because it's going to be important that you get plenty of practice.